Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Sharyn Taylor, who's going to talk to us about surveillance. There's been a massive amount of activity around surveillance space in the last 12 months. It'll be a good chance to give you a bit of an update.
Good afternoon, everyone. I realise we don't have a backup plan. You may, and I apologise if you've heard me coughing through this, so I really hope my voice holds out for this set of slides. In terms of where we've been sitting at, as Greg has mentioned, there's been a large amount of activity in the surveillance space, and I would like to acknowledge up front for all of these slides that a lot of this activity has been because of a significant contribution from the Australian government through the Agricultural Competitiveness White Paper. So many of these projects are actually linking to work that's being undertaken within those white paper initiatives. There are also industry programs that we've got throughout this surveillance space. In terms of broader initiatives in surveillance and highlights that we've seen, we've actually been progressing the surveillance network, which has been called the Plant Surveillance Network Australasia Pacific, or PSNAP. That's going to be the national network. We do have New Zealand colleagues, hence the Australasia, and broadening into the Pacific as well. That network will be formally initiated when we launch the new website, and it will be based off the National Plant Biosecurity Diagnostics Network in terms of the success of bringing together core groups of people, or core people who work in the diagnostics case, in the diagnostics network, and in our case it'll be in surveillance and surveillance practitioners. As I said, once that website that we've got, which we hope to finalise by the end of May, has been launched, we'll be initiating a membership drive, and the website will be used to provide tools and resources for that network. Other broad initiatives, we're testing the new National Reference Standard for development of surveillance protocols, and we've got roughly 15 draft protocols underway, which will be used to test that national reference standard. We've just completed, and by just, we completed it last week, the Annual Surveillance Workshop 2019. It was our largest in this formal series of workshops that we've been doing and running it for the last 3 years with Australian government funding. We had 62 attendees, and we had quite a broad mix of government, industry and R&D people at that workshop. We were really looking at national capability capacity needs, but certainly we saw some new technologies and new areas being presented. In terms of other work that we've been doing, we've been actually running a piece of work or a project looking at the framework required to establish area freedom. And that's been looking at a series of case studies. So we looked at capra beetle, tomato, potato psyllid, and we've also looked at myrtle rust for those case studies. And we'll be assessing the data and systems that we actually saw with those case studies to look at how we can better define area freedom. Other work, we're looking at development of field guides to assist surveillance, so citrus and mangoes. We've got some field guides underway, which we'll be rolling out through to citrus and mango industries. And we're also looking at data capture in the mango industry. So really, the first time the mango industry has been able to capture surveillance data, and we'll look at putting that into AusPestCheck. We've got to continue a couple of larger programs. So we have the citrus biosecurity program, the forest biosecurity program, and I realise one of the ones I've forgotten to add is a very big one, which is the National Bee Pest Surveillance Program. All of these programs are looking at capture of surveillance data, and in the citrus and forest biosecurity program case, they're also looking at a long-term governance and funding model to support particularly surveillance, but also biosecurity in those industries. We have been working quite hard on development of a number of strategies. So we've actually started work on development of a national temperate fruit biosecurity surveillance strategy in recognition that there are a number of temperate fruit industries that probably won't be able to go it on their own in terms of developing large surveillance programs. But the development of this temperate fruit strategy is actually looking at and talking with the stakeholders from both industry and government about what surveillance may look like either in a regional framework or in cross-industry frameworks. We're running a couple of pilots there, both in consultation and in actually developing surveillance initiatives. We've just started work on another collaborative surveillance strategy. We're calling that the Northern Plant Industry Surveillance Strategy. So looking at all of those industries in the north of Australia. And we've got James Walker, who's working with PHA at the moment on secondment, who will be driving that work. We've just started work on a national potato industry biosecurity surveillance strategy, and we'll be working with AusVeg on that one. A lot of activity in AusPestCheck over the last couple of months. Certainly we've looked at developing new management tools within AusPestCheck, specifically for the National Plant Health Surveillance Program, and a number of ways to actually manage data within that. In terms of the bee program, we've been looking at a lot of enhancements, and those enhancements will continue both for viruses, for data collection, for remote catch boxes within that program. So looking at our key drivers as we move forward, we've got a number of things I've already mentioned, so we're continuing a lot of that work. But one of the things that we will be doing, Rod mentioned review of the National Plant Biosecurity Strategy, our overarching strategy. We will be reviewing or starting the review of the National Plant Biosecurity Surveillance Strategy, and all of those are being done concurrently so that we can get key learnings across all of our stakeholders in the system. We'll be driving membership of the network of PSNAP. We'll be undertaking quite a bit of work to develop and expand a Botanic Gardens network, so really looking at building on the current Botanic Gardens Australia-New Zealand network and looking at what they require in terms of tools, resources and capacity for surveillance. We'll also be looking at further expansion of professional development in the surveillance space, and one of the first cabs off the rank in that will be a citrus field triage workshop, which will give us a lot of information in terms of what we need to actually improve surveillance in the field. And funding permitting or pending receiving funding, we certainly hope to keep the series of annual surveillance workshops going. We will be moving on to industry surveillance strategies and finalising a lot of those in the next 19-20 period. So all of the ones I've mentioned, temperate fruit, northern industries, potato, and also the grain surveillance strategy, which Rod mentioned in his talk, all of those will be finalising stakeholder consultation, preparing the strategies, and looking at pilot programs of activity. And AusPestCheck, we are doing quite a lot of work in the upcoming year, and that will be looking at further enhancements for collection of plant surveillance data, so the National Plant Health Surveillance Program, which is an Australian government-funded program, which the jurisdictions undertake surveillance in that program. We'll also, and we have just started work on a larger piece of work to capture, analyse and provide data in animal health surveillance. So working very closely with Animal Health Committee on that one, and we're going to be making sure that whatever we learn across both of those systems for plants and animals, we can cherry pick to make sure that we actually build a better system overall. And we will be investigating options for what it would require to capture general surveillance data, and that's actually linking with other projects that are coming out of the white paper.
Fabulous, thanks Sharyn. I presume you're all still very quiet, so obviously confident and thoroughness of the transparency of the presentation being given, which is really good.